Good evening, Rookie Realtor Intensive. I am Kathy coming to you tonight for our lab to go over much of the training that we talked about today. Again, I wanted to give a recap of what we discussed today. We discussed the importance of a buyer agency agreement. What is the difference between a customer and a client, and how important it is for your safety. Now, I started these challenges, if you will, because I've been listening to a guy named Pedro Adele. You can look him up. He's the challenge guy, and he has run 54 successful challenges. But part of the art of running challenges is knowing your audience. And my audience is rookie realtors, those that are starting out in the business of real estate, wanting to learn the intricacies of getting their business started, gaining some momentum. I'm looking to see, because I actually sent out a couple of invitations and I have some people on the wrong Zoom link. So I wanted to check that. Yeah, I am in the right place. Okay, so the first thing first is we'll recap the difference between a customer and a client. A customer is pretty much anyone that takes a look at your service that you're offering, whether you're in sales. Sales is service, and sales is leadership. Sales is if you feel that you have to give someone a push, then it's not sales. If someone's leaning in and they want more of what you have to offer, then that's sales, okay? So that's really the business that I'm in, and hopefully it's the business that you're in and that you want to be a part of. The first form I'd like to go over with you is the buyer agency agreement. In the state of Washington, we use the buyer agency agreement. Buyer agency agreement tells what the duties are of the buyer as well as well, let me back that up. It tells what the duties are of the licensee to the public, okay? So the licensee, that being the broker, it gives definitions of the broker. Let's just pull up one to make this easier. So I'm gonna do a share screen, and I'm gonna go to my, let's see, that's the listing. Let's see which form this is. Okay, that's the listing input. That's the exclusive listing agreement. I know what I can do. I could pull it up. I'm sure I have it on here. I saved it. Here we go. Maybe it's over here. Let's see. I know how I can do it. Under forms. It's moving slow. And while that's coming up, the law of agency came about. The new agency pamphlet was revised in 2013. So if we look here, this is the law of agency pamphlet. I'm going to click on this, open it up. We're just going to go over this form. If it'll, I want it to come up. I keep downloading it. We're going to go over this form just a little bit, and then we're going to go over an actual buyer agency agreement. So the agency law talks about definitions of, hopefully you can't hear my grandsons running around like crazy, but okay, so it's opening up. The agency pamphlet is a pamphlet that anytime you're entering into a contract with a client or you're providing law of agency, it is right here, that one over there, close a couple of these windows, buyer agency agreement, and if you see a form that looks like it's blue in color, it says the law of agency pamphlet. You may have seen that when you purchased real estate or when you sold real estate. It's a form in the state of Washington that we must provide the public to outline what our duties are. It expresses what the duties are of the seller's agent, buyer's agent, dual agency, which some people are not really clear about, and those different relationships. And then if we go after definitions, after you look at the definitions, which if you're new to being licensed, part of your test had to do with what some of these definitions mean. So it's important to go back over them so you understand them when you're interacting with the public. But I want to jump ahead to, this is duties to the public, duties of brokers in general, and we'll scroll down to duties of a seller's agent and buyer's agent. So this outlines what our duties are when we work with buyers and sellers. And if you read through this, you'll see sometimes we're actually offering services before we have a contract. So the public can feel that we are their representative, even when we haven't had them sign a contract. And that's mostly on the buyer side. On the seller side, you can't, unless they're selling it themselves or for sale by owner, and you're doing like a one-party listing agreement, you cannot enter into a listing agreement without a seller authorizing you to sell the property. Okay, so a buyer agency agreement is duties of a buyer's agent. If we look, the first one, to be loyal. To be loyal to the buyer by taking no action that is adverse to determine to the buyer's, that's detrimental to the buyer's interest in a transaction. We'll stop right there. That basically is saying if you do something as a buyer's agent, for example, you might have a second buyer that's looking at the exact same house. If you show that house to a buyer that's competing with the buyer you already have an agency relationship with, you have in essence done something detrimental to cause adverse or harm to their interests. So you might not see that as a new licensee or new realtor, but anytime you do something that would take away from that buyer's interest, you are in fact harming them. Now, if the buyer you're working with says, I'm not interested in that house, even though you showed it to me, we're moving on, then you can go ahead and show it to another buyer. But in an active market where there is limited inventory, you might run up against buyers of your own that are looking at the same property. But once you make an offer on the property for that particular buyer, you can no longer show that to buyers that you work with. You would have to refer them to someone else. I hope that's clear. That is a difficult thing to do when you have limited inventory and you have limited clients. So I wanted to go into that buyer agency agreement. Just doing a quick look because, yep, because I'm doing a shared screen, so I can't see the chat or anything. I can't even see if someone wants to come in. But just wanted to show you the buyer agency agreement. So as we scroll through, let's go up to the top of the seller's duty of the seller's agent. The first one, again, to be loyal. So what does loyalty look like in not committing an adverse or detrimental action that's against the seller in a transaction? What that could look like is you are providing information that the seller has given you that is privileged between you and the, I use the word privilege. We're not attorneys, but we're practicing, you know, legal practice because we're having forms that are pre-printed that were created by attorneys. So in essence, we're doing the act of legal, we have legal documents. So if we were to basically say to our buyer, let's say we have a buyer and we have a seller. So you have this new listing, you're excited. You have this new buyer, you're excited. So you have a buyer agency agreement in one hand and you have a listing agreement in the other. And now you have the opportunity for what's called dual agency. So dual agency is where you're working for both parties. Now, when people are getting divorced, they don't want the same attorney. And sometimes in real estate, they don't want the same attorney either. But it could work to your advantage as well as the seller's advantage to do dual agency. It's just the seller needs to know and the buyer needs to know. And so what I wanted to discuss is what could be detrimental if you're working with a seller? If the seller has told you personally, well, I'm going to list it at this amount, but I'm willing to accept this amount, and you turn around and you disclose that to the buyer you're working with or another party, you have in essence created something that's harmful to the seller or a detriment to the seller's interest, because you don't know that the seller could not have received more for their property. You just disclosed something that was not something that you had a right to disclose because the seller didn't authorize you to disclose that. Now, in some cases, sellers will say, I authorize you or will allow you to give out this information. If there's multiple offers, for example, if there's multiple offers and the seller says it's okay for you to disclose that I have an offer over list price, or it's okay to disclose that they have to make an offer higher than the list price. I mean, those sort of things you can disclose, but only if the seller allows you to. We're in a very competitive market, probably nationwide, but within our state, I have seen a lot of brokers that are listing properties put remarks in the listing or say things that I'm not sure that they've discussed with their seller or not. I mean, only they would know that. But just be careful because you're liable to your seller and the seller has a contract relationship with you. You are the seller's broker. So in that case, you want to do everything to be helpful to the seller, to market the property and to sell it for the highest price. So that is a agency disclosure. And was gonna go over each section, but you could take the time to read that yourself. Now I want to jump back on Northwest MLS and show you the buyer agency agreement. The buyer agency agreement is Form 41A. So this is the Northwest MLS form section. Northwest MLS has just come out with a new form section. There's a classic and then there's a newer form section. So as I said, real estate is ever changing. And if you're just getting in, it's good to learn the new forms, the new way, the new portals, because if you come in the middle of a transition and you learn the old is going to go away pretty soon. So let me find 41A, buyer agency agreement. Now each agreement will come with a manual. See this one, 41A? So the manual will help you in filling it out, but I'm going to point out some things that I do. Now, some brokers don't believe in having buyer agency agreements, but I will say that the law states that if you do not have a buyer agency agreement, then the buyer can pretty much work with whoever they want to work with. So in essence, they could have multiple brokers working in their interest and their loyalty is not there. And so you could end up being one of those brokers that has spent a lot of time and energy on a buyer and you don't get any sale from it. So let's look at this buyer agency agreement. So some of it's pretty self-explanatory as far as filling it out. It's made on this whatever date between, okay, it'll have the firm, which will be the firm you work with, and then the buyer. I'm gonna mute and ask my daughter to lower her tone. I'm recording. Okay, so on this, you would put the buyer's name. You may have 2 buyers. Sometimes you might have more than 1 buyer. You might have 3 buyers. Then you would just put them all on this line. And then it says agency or firm appoints. You put your name. And then here, area. I don't recommend that you leave any part of the form blank. However, if you do leave this particular, hold on a second. My goodness. Hey guys, I'm recording. Sorry. So on this particular part, of the form, where it talks about area, wherever you're going to be showing the buyer property, it says if you leave it blank, it's unlimited. Now, if you have a buyer that's not quite sure where they want to live, where they want to shop, then you might just want to type the word unlimited or leave it blank. I don't really recommend, again, on any form to leave anything blank. Okay, term of the agreement. These agreements are short. I say short because 4 months is really not a long time from locating the property until closing. But it could be a long time if you're in a very brisk market, which right now we still are in a pretty fluid market. So expire on, I would go ahead and put the 120 days. You can actually make that longer. So that's saying if it's blank, the default is 120 days. So I would go ahead and put in 120 days. And then under compensation, this is the part that's very important that you need to pay attention to. So this is how you get paid in real estate. You get paid a commission on the sale of a transaction once it's closed. So until it's closed, you don't get paid. There's no compensation. So you could, in essence, work for free for quite a while, unless you set up some sort of retainer, but that's further down the road. I don't think that would be appropriate or good to practice on new brokers or new realtors, or even if you're refreshing, it's good to at least understand the basics before you go on to the next level. So term of the agreement, we talked about compensation. Here we go. This agreement creates so you can either be exclusive or non-exclusive. In this case, you want an exclusive relationship. You want the client to only work with you. Now, in some instances, if the buyer is looking in 2 different areas, I've had that where a buyer is looking in my market and they're also looking in another market that I don't service. So in that case, it would be a non-exclusive, meaning they're working with me in Thurston County and they're working with someone else in King County. So that would be an instance of non-exclusive. But for the purposes of this lab, I would say exclusive. You want an exclusive agreement, just like you want an exclusive relationship, right? Exclusive. Okay, and then the next part, so that's about your agency relationship. And then it says buyer shall compensate firm as follows. Now, the question is typically, well, I thought the seller pays the commission, not the buyer. Well, really, it's both, because the seller allows a certain percentage of the sale of their property to be allocated toward commission, but the money comes from the buyer who's bringing in cash or getting financing for the property. So really, it's both. So it's not accurate to say to a buyer, you don't pay me, you get my services for free. I used to say that early on. I didn't know any better. Hopefully you will, is that both parties are contributing to the commission, because the buyer brings in the funds and the seller allocates the funds. Because on the commission listing agreement, it will say what percentage of the sale goes toward commission. And when you took your licensing test, you learn how to calculate commission, what that looks like. So let's look right here. What would I put in that form? Buyer shall pay firm compensation as follows. You could check that box and put an amount. I'm just going to check it for now. And if your firm requires a certain percentage of compensation, you could put that in. Let's say you want to put in 3%. But then you see a listing that only offers 2.5%. So who pays that other 0.5%? Well, the buyer does. But the buyer needs to understand that they are paying a 0.5 point commission if there's any shortage in commission on the listing agreement. And they need to understand that they can pay that in as part of their closing costs. Now, if that's too scary, what I do for newbies is I start out here under other. So I'm going to check other. If I can get my box to check. Come on. Here we go. Come on. So that says other. And then I type in SOC per listing agreement. Then I say, in the case of for sale by owner, commission is negotiated between sellers and buyers, and amount of, and this is where you would determine your commission. So I am going to say 2.5%. That's what I would go somewhere between 2.5 and 3. Now, commissions are negotiable, and your firm will dictate what commissions you can charge, because some firms may say, I don't want you accepting less than this amount, because the firm ends up getting a portion of the commission, unless you have some sort of 100% compensation. So I would just go ahead and put in, let's see, I'll go ahead and put in 3%, because that's what I would want. Why not? You work hard, you deserve it. Let me find my percentage sign. 3%. 3%. Can't find my percent sign. Is that percent? I'm going to write the word percent because I can't see it. Percent. 3% of the purchase price. Purchase price. Okay, so SOC, you can write that out. Sales office commission per listing agreement. We can even take that further and say, as noted in MLS. That's important because some brokers have been known to change the commission because a seller may decide they want to reduce the price and they want the brokers to participate in the price reduction by reducing their commission. So you may have started out with a 3% sales office commission, and the seller says, can you change that to 2.5? And if you were to do that after you have an acceptable offer, then you have in essence altered the compensation for the buyer broker, and you can't do that. Now, before it goes under contract, if you want to change the commission, that's fine. But once it's under contract, most offices, such as my own, will print out the before and the after. So you get a copy of the listing before it went under contract and once it goes pending. And if the sales office commission compensation doesn't match, then there's a problem. There'll be a problem between the firms because the commission belongs to the firm. Commission belongs to the office. So sales office commission per listing agreement, as noted in the MLS, in the case of for sale by owners or FSBOs, commission is negotiated between sellers and buyers in the amount of 3% of the purchase price. So all parties are put on notice that this is how much you're expecting in compensation. Now, if you want to change those amounts based on wherever you work or what's acceptable to your client, then change them, because that's how basically this is your paycheck. So remember that compensation and scope of agency. Okay, let's go down. The rest of it is pretty standard. It talks about compensation, the firm, listing firm duties, warranties, representations, inspection, attorney's fees. Now, in the event of suit concerning this agreement, including claims, pursuant to Washington Consumer Protection Act, the prevailing party is entitled to court costs and reasonable attorney fees. The venue of any suit shall be the county in which the property is located. So oftentimes we as brokers work in different counties. If there's ever a legal claim for the Consumer Protection Act, the buyer, the seller want to file a suit, it'll be within the county in which the property is. And then the rest of it, basically the buyer signs, you sign, you note their contact information, and that's it. So in essence, you've taken this 41A, which is the buyer agency agreement, right? 41A, and you're going to have the buyer complete that before you enter into a contract, right, to purchase property. So basically, this is when you're starting out looking to show them property. You let them know my business practice is to create a buyer agency relationship between us. And by doing so, my firm or my broker requires that we create this form. I've done this for people that I know. I've done this for people I don't know. And oftentimes the people that you know are the ones that will burn you. So it's good to have one just signed by everybody. It's just makes it easier. And so that's the buyer agency agreement. And I would take this form, which is the law of agency pamphlet, go to the very top of it, and I would have the buyer and seller initial that. So if you're working with a buyer and you fill out the 41A buyer agency agreement, then you also want to attach the law of agency pamphlet. So you have those two documents for your buyer. Now you take this law of agency pamphlet also when you're working with sellers. And the first form we'll look at is the exclusive sale and listing agreement. I use the form 1A. There's also I believe it's 1B, which is non-exclusive. I don't use that because I want the relationship between us. To me, it's like a marriage, okay? There's only two parties in the marriage, right? A husband and a wife. In most cases, in my case, I'll say, the marriage is that way. So the relationship in the contract is that way. So in this particular exclusive listing agreement, you're going to fill it out. And then if you jump down, you're going to have your dates. Here we go, commission. So this paragraph, these two paragraphs are basically your compensation and the other broker's compensation. When I say other broker, it's the buyer broker's compensation. So if you're working with a seller, you are the seller's agent. And if you are working with the buyer, you're the buyer's agent or buyer broker. Excuse me, they changed the terms, recently changed the term. We used to always use the term agent. I believe it's using the term broker now. I don't really see it. Seller, buyer brokerage. Yep, they changed it. It used to be buyer agent. Now it says buyer brokerage firm. So it's making the language more easy for all parties to understand who represents who in the transaction. So that is now right here, let's hone in here. So if you were to write, and this is a rookie mistake, if you were to write what you think your compensation is right here, let's say you put in a 3. I'll just put in a number 3. If it'll stay there, great. Come on. Okay. Doesn't want to. Okay. Just pretend there's a 3 there. Okay. And then down here, that says total commission. So what that would mean is that's the total commission the seller could agree to pay. And I just had this instance where a client of mine thought the total commission was going to be 3%. I said, that would mean I would split that 3% with another broker. They said, well, we didn't understand that. We thought just the total commission was 3. I said, no, I typically charge 6%, but I'll discount it to 5%, and that 5% gets split in half. So in this case where it's flashing, that would be a 5, and I cannot get my computer to act right. Okay, 5. Okay, so, and then this part, the second part says buyer brokerage firm, which is the firm that's represented by the buyer. Buyer brokerage firm, a commission of fill in or strike the other, then you'd put that percentage. So whatever the total commission is, you typically will see a split. So that compensation would be put in that second part. Some brokers are not splitting it equally. It's not a requirement or a rule that you split it equally. It's just good business practice. If you know, if you're out working with a buyer, you're doing a lot of work too. So compensation, in my opinion, is depending on how many parties are in the transaction. Sometimes on a listing side, you might have a team, so they might be heavy on compensation side, meaning they have many people to pay, or they might put certain caveats into the agreement to list the property. For example, I will put a drone. I'll offer a drone in the I'll offer a drone in the listing, or I'll offer staging, and I do my own staging. I'll offer just some sort of concierge service, which would rationalize why I would want to get paid more on my side than the buyer side. But that's, you're in sales. Sales is service. So whatever service it is you want to provide the seller, you just need to be able to explain what that service is and why you're providing that service and how much it's costing the seller in the long run. And the seller can say, I don't want that, so cut the commission down. So that's all negotiable. Okay, this talks about short sales, distress sales. Earlier today in training, I was saying that's another prospecting opportunity that you could go after. The listing agreement talks about the key box on the house, talks about fair housing, which is very important. We can't discriminate. It talks about closing, with the closing form that's required. It's a FERPTA. It's another form. 22E is required when you list a property. Multiple listing service, it talks about the reports, what's going to go into MLS. Some sellers don't want their phone numbers on there. Some sellers don't want certain things on there. Some sellers don't want their name on there, even though it's public information. The seller has a right to withhold that information because they know it goes on public sites. There's other forms that you would need to put into MLS in order to do that, in order to hide the seller's name or hide the seller's phone number. Basically saying the seller needs to keep property insurance during the term of the listing, talks about damages, attorney's fees, and last but not least, are you the authorized sole owners? Believe it or not, there are people that attempt to sell properties that don't belong to them. That's why this question is asked. And any fraud to this form, anything that's written on here that's untrue is considered fraud. So if the seller's committing fraud, then it's, you know that now. I mean, you would know that once we got to closing, because they wouldn't be the sole owner. We'd find out there's other owners. So it's probably not going to happen to you, right? At least we hope not. Okay, so that's the 1A. And then the other form that you will fill out for a listing is a pretty lengthy form. This is all the input. And so you could actually take this form and upload it to MLS, but it's always best when you do that. It'll show up as a incomplete listing. I like to take those incomplete listings and share them with the seller so the seller can see this is the information that's going into MLS. And they could decide at that time, oh no, we don't have 3 bedrooms, we have 4, or oh no, we also have a den, or oh no, we have, we have a microwave and we have a detached garage, not an attached garage, just little details, or we have a generator that you didn't mention. I mean, whatever you need to input to market the listing, you do so. You could put virtual tours on here. You put showing information, how you planning to show it. Homeowners, what homeowners dues include the school districts. You can put almost anything that you think might be helpful to marketing the property. And so if a field's not covered, I'm going to scroll down toward the bottom where you could write in additional features. This is the public remarks. It's called marketing remarks. This is where you would put all the information concerning the listing that you think would attract people, like bells and whistles, or things that were not covered above. Some people repeat some of the same things. That's not necessary. It's important to do something that would enhance visibility, stop the scroll. People look, wow, that's something I really want to take a look at. And then here, confidential broker remarks. These are remarks that are only between you and the other broker. For example, the security code is located in the key box, or you could say something like the lockbox is on the back door. The lockbox is the front left of the door. I mean, you want to give, or you could say that I have multiple offers. We are reviewing offers. Give your highest and best offer tomorrow. So this is where you just put remarks that you want to communicate to the other broker. Then you have your driving directions. So that completes your listing input sheet. Now I'm going to stop sharing screens. I'm going to stop sharing screens, and I want to talk to you about prospecting. Prospecting is something that keeps your business flowing. It's something that's very important that not a lot of brokers do. So prospecting, excuse me, I have a lot of background noise at home. Tomorrow I will post in the office. Sorry. Okay. Prospecting is the process of cultivating. It's asking questions, basically, to get a conversation started, to find out if your service is something that your client or your prospect needs. How could a conversation start? Well, it begins naturally. It could be with someone you know or someone you don't know. So a conversation with someone you know could be, you're creating your database, you're letting them know, hey, I've changed careers, I've retired out of the military, I've, switched careers. So the conversation might go, hi, Jennifer, I just got out of the military and I decided I was going to get into real estate, and I'm so excited about what's in store. I really enjoy helping people find their perfect home. That could be kind of conversation starter. So if something's said, then you respond back in kind. Ultimately, your end goal is to get a lead, right? The lead could be the person you're talking to, or the lead could be something like this. And this is a leading question. If you know of anyone that's looking to buy or sell real estate, will you pass on my name and refer me? Now, their response might be, why would I refer you? You just got your license. Well, your response could be, I work in a firm with over 200 years of experience. These people have been around since the turn of the century. Well, that's probably exaggerating, but these people have been around in the industry for, in my case, 27 plus years. Then there's other brokers that have been in the industry for over 30 years. So there's a wealth of knowledge. And that's a term you can borrow. There's a wealth of knowledge back behind me, and they won't let me go wrong. They assist me in the process of writing contracts so I don't mess it up, so I don't make a rookie mistake. And so those are some of the conversation starters that you can have with people. Now, with people you don't know, whether you're in, let's say you go to a gym or you go to the grocery store, or just tonight I was at the gas station, and the guy looked at my car and he says, wow, an Audi. I don't see too many Audis. Now, I didn't realize this was my neighbor in the neighborhood I'm in. I didn't even realize it, but he realized it. He says, so how's business? So he's asking me. And then I proceeded to tell him how business was. And then we started talking, it didn't sound like he had a need, because then I recognized, okay, you're my neighbor. You already have a house. And, so we had just a little bit of small talk. But let's say you have a conversation and you want that conversation to ultimately lead to a sale, then the right questions need to be asked in order to get to that point. So it could go, and actually I just finished some sales training with Pedro, and I have some conversation starters. So here's an example of a conversation starter. How have you been? Okay, of course. What have you, How's business? Just like he asked me, how's business? So you could ask that of someone that's not in real estate. You could say, how's business? They could say, oh, it's great. I have all these new customers, all these new clients. And so then the follow-up question to that could be, are you looking to expand? Are you looking to grow? And so if the answer is yes, then that could take you to a possible sale, right? Because all roads lead to the sale. All roads lead to the relationship. All roads lead to service because you are providing a service. Yes, it is sales, but it's not pushing. I don't see sales as pushing. Remember at the beginning, I said, if you feel the person is being pushed, then you're not selling. If you feel the person is leaning in and they want to hear more and they want to know more, then that's sales because they want what you have. Sales is giving someone what they want that you have. So you are providing a service and that service happens to be real estate. So again, another conversation could be, and these could be from phone calls, these could be face-to-face interactions. So when they say it's not, sales are down or something like that, that conversation could lead to a need. That need could be they need to sell a property, they need to, downsize. That could mean that. Or if a person just had a baby, it could be they're looking to buy their first home or they're looking to move out of a rental situation so that they can have more bedrooms. All of those are conversations that could lead to sales. Now, at the training earlier today, I talked about the ABCs of sales. And this is what you want to do when you prospect, is you want to write down as much information from the prospect as possible because you're going to use that information with your follow-up. And so what are those three things I said? I said ABC. So A is the name, B is the email address, and C is the phone number. So once you make that call, or once you make that contact with the person, you have that information. Now, when you've asked them how's business, you want to go ahead and write that down too. Write down as much information as possible. If you happen to know this person pretty well and you know their birthday, or if you know their kids' names, you know their dog's name, all of that you can use in marketing because you can take those names or that information and do a follow-up marketing piece. It could go something like this. Like the guy at the gas station who happened to be my neighbor, who happened to have a dog, who I happened to forget he was my neighbor, who asked me how was business. I could send a postcard to him, just giving him an update, a market update, and say, how's your dog? Or, or something like that. But I could have a postcard of a dog. In fact, I could take it a step further and have a postcard of the same type of dog. Excuse me, I need something to drink. So in marketing, excuse me, next time I will have water at hand. In marketing, you want to have, I'm looking to see if there's some water around. In marketing, you want to use things that are familiar for the person you're working with. So when you follow up, you have that information that you can use that will trigger them to say, wow, they remember. Wow, they care. Wow, they're not just pushing me into this. I actually had a call today from a gentleman who remembered me from a home that I used to own in another city. And he said, well, I figured I'd call you because I remember when you used to come out to the property and check on it. I remember when your husband used to come out to the property and check on it. So things like that, people remember. They remember seeing you from afar. So whatever line of work you used to work in, just think about that in terms of relationship, because people see you in all facets. Real estate isn't one narrow focus. It's pretty much a lifestyle. Real estate is a lifestyle. So when you think about prospecting, think about all the activities that you do, all the people you come into contact with, all of the conversations you have, all of the things that you can write down in a day that you could follow up on maybe next week with that same contact. And that contact could reveal more and more, and you could be building your real estate career off of a few conversations. Because if they don't know someone, if they are not the one, they might know someone that needs your service. Again, sales is service. Service is leadership. Leadership is sales. Sales is not pushy. Sales is entering into a conversation to provide a need that someone's asked. Just think of it this way. If you're not providing that service, will they be able to get it somewhere else? Maybe. Will they be able to get it the same level of service that you could provide? Maybe not. Because ultimately, you have the connection for the business that you generate. You have those connections. So I will close out tonight early because it is getting louder and louder here. And I want to thank you for joining me tonight on the 3-day Rookie Realtor Intensive. This is the lab tonight. So if you missed the training earlier today, I did a recap as well as a recording. I am offering the replays of the 3-day intensive as well as the labs. No, yes, 3-day intensive as well as the labs for $18. And then after that, we'll see where that leads us to. I'm just excited about sharing the opportunity to grow your real estate career. Sorry, it's noisy. To start off on the right track of real estate. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you tomorrow. Good night.